Hey guys, welcome to my October reading wrap-up. I read a lot of books in October, so I decided that I was going to only post one video a week over here on BookTube because I was feeling overwhelmed, and I did one video a week and I filled that extra time with tons of reading. I don't know the number of books that I read this month. I'll put it here. I feel like it's significantly more than normal. I feel like I generally read like 10 to 12. Is that number more? Probably. It has to be. Yeah, it has to be. So I filmed clips for the most part through the month, sharing my thoughts so I didn't forget too much. So we will dive into the clips and hear my thoughts on all the books. Welcome to October's first reading check-in. A variety of books to share so far. The very first book that I finished this month is The Nightmare Virus. I was listening to this on audio. This is a science fiction dystopian book by Nadine Brandeis that I started on ebook in July, and I worked at it for a couple weeks and got up to 16%, and then Holly was messaging me about it and I was like, okay, I will finish this book. So I decided to get it on audio and read through it. This is set in a world where they have now been able to create these things called dreamscapes, where you can enter these like worlds in your dreams, I guess. I actually don't even really understand how the science of it works, which is normal for science fiction, but this one feels a little bit even more foggy than normal. But there has become this virus that people get infected with, and after 22 days, I think it is, they stop waking up. Like they fall asleep, and then when they're asleep they enter this dreamscape that is just like a black tunnel kind of thing. And our main character, we are with him close-ish to the end of his 22 days. So after 22 days, you know, your body can live for a little bit without food and water, but eventually you die. So you get trapped in the nightmare. And he is infected with the virus, but trying to find a cure. And so he goes into this dreamscape and all sorts of things happen through the book. And I just didn't love it. Like, I mean, I was kind of already guessing that by the fact that it took me weeks to get to 16% in the book. It's not like it's a massive book. But I really had to force myself. I never got attached to our characters. Especially like talking with Holly a little bit, I've decided that Nadine Brandeis, I've loved two of her books and they were both historical fantasy. And I've decided I'm going to stick with historical fantasy. If she writes more of those, I'm there. But her other books, I just don't think they're for me. So it's kind of an unpopular opinion. Other than Holly, I feel like everyone's been loving her last couple books and they're just not for me. Oh, I should also mention that at the beginning of the book, I was really struggling that our main character was a guy, like a teenage boy. My brain wanted him to be a girl, and I don't know why. Like, I kept reading and being like, oh no, like this is a guy, not a girl. So that also really took me out of it. I just kept having to, it felt like a jarring reminder all the time. And I don't know if, like, she has written male main characters before. Fox is one of my favorites by her, and it's a male main character. So I don't know why that felt so wrong, but my brain was really struggling with that as well. No idea. Okay, then I finished my Dorothy Gilman for the month. This was my patron of the month's pick for me, was the next book in the Mrs. Polifax series. So this was Mrs. Polifax and the Hong Kong Buddha, number 7 in the series. We are following Mrs. Polifax as she goes back to China. Well, Hong Kong, which right now in this time is I don't think it's part of China. That's kind of part of it. It's interesting. I'm like learning all this history because this book was written in 85. So the series started in the 70s, and it's interesting hearing about like the history from these different countries, but written in a time when it wasn't really history. So Mrs. Polifax needs to go to Hong Kong because a guy that she helped in the previous book, Mrs. Polifax on the China Station, is in need of her help again. And you definitely need to read the Mrs. Polifax books in order. There's so much character growth with her, karate skill growth with her, but also a lot of the characters reappear and it just wouldn't be nearly as meaningful without the background knowledge of the previous books. I loved this little quote here. It said, Mrs. Halifax measured intelligence by curiosity, ruining people who never asked questions, never asked why or what happened next or how. I loved that, especially as a homeschool parent. Like, curiosity, it makes so much, it generates so much learning. When you're curious, you want to learn. Okay, there was something funny, and I don't want to give spoilers, but there was like this one scene at the beginning of the book when she's flying to Hong Kong and this guy's incredibly rude to her and he has a Canadian passport, and I was like, oh, were Canadians not polite then? I was a little offended for my countrymen there, but yeah, it all makes sense a little bit later. Oh, okay, one more scene which I'll try to be very vague about. Middle of the night, Mrs. Halifax is in her hotel room. She calls up someone and she says, name, there's a man in my room. He said pleasantly, for a moment I thought you said there was a man in your room. I did, she told him. He's here on the floor. Again, he said incredulously. Another? Because she just uses her karate skills and puts full-grown men out on the floor. Love her. Then I started my DIY literature degree with The Rackety Packety House. I thought I would start with like a super easy one since I'm doing children's literature as my specialty. This is by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and this is a decently long picture book from 1906 or 08, and it's all like monochrome, just kind of like the sepia kind of pictures, and it is about these dolls in this dollhouse that, you know, started out life well, but then they've got passed down from generations, and their newest owner girl thinks they're a little bit raggedy, and then she gets a new dollhouse and they kind of get left behind, forgotten about a little bit. Quick one. It has a lot of words for a picture book. It's like a slight younger chapter book. Like, it's a weird in between a picture book and a chapter book, but it feels good to have started my DIY literature degree, even if it was like a super easy way to start it. I also decided, this happens to me often, I decided to DNF Woven, not, this is by Angie Smith, Understanding the Bible as One Seamless Story. Not because I wasn't enjoying it. This is just the retelling of the Bible story with some like good sarcastic humor that I enjoy, but it needed to go back to the library. I wasn't done it yet, and so I've decided to bring it back, you know, because that would be the thing to do so I don't get fines. And I was remembering that I do enjoy it, so I don't know, I'm really tempted. I mentioned in one of my vlogs recently, I'm tempted to like try out the Bible study and maybe do it with some people, because this also has a Bible study version with videos, so that's a definite possibility. I do not think her sarcastic humor will be for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. Wow, I didn't realize I'd finished so many books because so many of them have been ebooks or audiobooks. So then an ebook that I finished is another 5-star by Kate Stradling. She just knocks it out of the park. I think, okay, the one book of hers, I cannot remember if I gave 5 stars or 4 stars. Let me just double check this so I can like actually say for sure. Okay, I gave one of her books 4 stars. All her other ones have been 5 stars. This one was Death Mark. So we are with this 19-ish-year-old woman. She's an indentured slave. Her mother died from this death mark, which happens, once you're infected, it like starts out kind of purple and then it spreads like a spider's web all over your body, and it's excruciating. Most people go to a sanatorium and live out their last days there. And so our main character is an indentured slave, and she gets the death mark right at the beginning of the book. And she decides to flee because she does not want to spend her, because they always kill people within 6 months. I think it's like closer to 3 months. And she doesn't want to live out the last of her days as a servant. So she flees this tavern where she's been a slave. And while she's like not very far away, she gets noticed by this guy that comes into the tavern every now and then, and he ends up telling her that he's gonna marry her instead, and they'll do whatever she wants for the days that she has left, and she wants to see the ocean and have better penmanship. And so it's like a marriage of convenience kind of storyline, but it doesn't really go where you think it's gonna go. So they go to the seashore, she starts working on her penmanship, and a lot more unfolds. But I love the way Kate Stradling reveals just a little bit at a time. I don't want to give any spoilers, but definitely check out her books. They are very, not like underrated as far as Goodreads. Pretty much all her books have over 4 stars on Goodreads. They're really good, but not enough people are talking about them, and more people should be. So please check out one of her books. And then the last one is an audiobook that I just finished yesterday, Tunnel of Bones. This is book 2 in the, what's the series, like Cassidy Blake, or yeah, it's just called Cassidy Blake. The first book is City of Ghosts. Our main character is Cassidy Blake. She nearly drowned like a year ago or so, and in doing so, this ghost saved her, this ghost boy saved her, and now she can see beyond the veil. She can see ghosts. And her parents, her mom is like a ghost hunter and her dad is a historian. So through this series, they're going to different places that are like really well known for being haunted places. So they went to Scotland in the first book somewhere. This one was set in Paris, and then I don't know where book 3 is, but that it's just the trilogy. So they go to these different places. So in this one, we go to the Tunnel of Bones, the catacombs under Paris, and it is like a great spooky middle grade book. I really enjoyed it, and I plan on reading book 3 soon, hopefully this month, so that I can like check off a series. And I believe that is all for now. So it's been a good start to the month. Here I went and cleared off that top shelf because Tolkien keeps knocking my books down. He was just lying there, and as I'm about to film, he decides to jump off and lie on the floor instead. So now that shelf is just awkwardly empty. I feel like I've had a good reading week or weekish since my last update. I finished a number of books. A little bit of variety here. The first one I finished is Just Ella by Margaret Peterson Haddix. So this is a Cinderella retelling, and Cinderella is my favorite of the princesses. Always has been, maybe partially because of Gus Gus, like it's all the Disney movies' fault. This one is slightly different. So we have Ella, who did go to a ball, was wearing glass slippers. The prince fell in love with her, but she realizes pretty quickly on that she was not really made to be a princess. She's really bad at not doing anything and getting people to do everything for her. And she also realizes that the prince is pretty boring. This is definitely a YA fantasy book, but I feel like the size makes it seem like it's more of a middle grade book. But some of the themes in here are like a little mature for a middle grader. I had no idea that this was actually YA. I feel like it's a little bit deceiving. Overall, it was fun. Like, it could have been so much more, but this is I think what YA was back in the day, right? 1999. If someone was rewriting this now, it would be much thicker. It would have some more depth to it, but it was good for what it was. I enjoyed the idea. And then continuing on with another short book I read, Married by Treachery. So this is part of the Arranged Marriages of the Fae series. They all have different authors. This one's Barbara Kloss. So this is a very, very loose, fantastical Jacob and Esau retelling. So our main character's name, Raquel. She has been training for years to be the next bride of Prince Edom. All the brides before seem to have died. They never come back. Every 7 years it is. It's so interesting. I mentioned this in my Triad chapter. All of a sudden this year I've read so many books where someone comes to a different kingdom and takes a bride every few years. The night I started this, I did a Triad chapter for Uprooted, and that had the same thing going. So this is also a short little book with a cool cover underneath the dust jacket. So Raquel has been training for years to kind of be an assassin because she wants to kill Prince Edom because he's been killing these girls, or they assume that he's been killing these girls. And a lot happens in a very short amount of time. Like I said, it's very loosely based off of Jacob and Esau, but it's so fantastical and stuff. Like there's some vague bits of the story in here, but it's pretty cool. I do think that because this is like a short little romantic-y book, there was an uncomfortable amount to me of emphasis on the physical attraction in here. Like I wish that could have been toned down a bit, especially if you're gonna have like some biblical threads in here, although the Bible is pretty intense in some spots too. But I would have personally have liked the physical attractionness to be talked about a little bit less, but overall I enjoyed the story. Now Tolkien has decided to come onto the bed and he's going to really annoy the tripod here. Okay, so any shaking is due to Tolkien right now. I apologize. Then I read an ebook. I read The Killer's Therapist. This is on Kindle Unlimited. I had heard about it in my Patreon book club. Someone was raving about it, so I thought I would check it out. It is about a woman who is a therapist to, I don't know if she's probably not just a therapist to killers, but people with very traumatic backgrounds. She had a very traumatic childhood, and she believes that people can change and be redeemed. Very quickly into the story, she realizes she's being targeted. First, her maid gets murdered in her house, and then other things keep happening to people around her, and now what? Now he's not gonna be, no, I've moved all the books up there. You're supposed to go on the empty. Why are cats so difficult? Okay, well, we'll see if we can ignore him. The common denominator is our main character. Can I remember her name? No, I can't. And so she's trying to figure things out. There are some twists in here. I definitely didn't see things coming. I was not scared. Like I was worried about reading this too late at night because sometimes that can get into my head and it affects my sleep. This one did not feel overly creepy to me. I'm not sure why, like there was creepy things happening until like the very end. The very end I thought was pretty creepy, but well done. So I enjoyed that one. Then I finally read The Secret Book and Scone Society by Ellery Adams. This one, I was forewarned that chapter 6 is a little intense. So our main character is Nora. She owns a bookstore and she is really good at listening to people's stories, problems, whatever they want to tell her, and giving them a prescription of a bunch of books to read to help them through that time or to face that problem or whatever it may be. She herself was burnt many years ago, and the nurse that was taking care of her brought her books. First some comfort books, then some books to like face her fears and help her get through, and hence why she wanted to own a bookstore. Right at the beginning of the book, there's a guy that's going to come to get her prescription, but on the way he ends up dying, probably being murdered. And so Nora, who has been a recluse for the most part, like obviously she owns a bookstore. You want to go out now? But she's lived in this town for years and she's never really made any close connections. Now suddenly she's forming a friendship with 3 other ladies. There's 4 of them. And they're trying to get to the bottom of this murder because it ends up kind of just blowing up. So chapter 6 is there's a scene for sure that a person can just skip over. I also feel like this book, that scene plus a few other spots were a little bit overly emphasizing the physical attraction and things going on for my liking, but I enjoyed the storyline enough to probably continue the series at some point. One nice thing is there's lots of bookish references here, a lot of books being talked about, and like lots of just like things that make you feel good as a reader. Becoming a reader is a change for the better. Trust me, no one has ever lost by becoming addicted to stories, to the lessons learned by those who possess enough courage to put pen to paper. Yeah, so I probably will continue the series at some point. We had a road trip this last weekend, so I finished The Secret Book and Scone Society on the way, And then I also finished Silver Bounty by Victoria McCombs. This is book 2 in the it's the Royal Rose Chronicles. So book 1 is Oathbound. Now I read that book, I would say like a year and a half ago maybe. It had been a while. I didn't really remember much going in, but the book did a good job of refreshing my memory. It's a fantastical pirate story where our main character is suffering from a disease and she needs this like rare nut to cure her or help her or something. And so she joins in with this gang of pirates to help heal herself. She is a daughter of this pirate named Arabella the Ruthless. Her mother is known for being completely ruthless. She is not that way. She's known for being very kind. Interestingly though, there are a lot of people in these books that are not. This series is one betrayal after another. There was one point in this book where I was like, I'm not even sure if I want to continue, because everyone's constantly backstabbing each other and often murdering people because why? I don't know, because they want to be the pirate of the ship, or it doesn't take much. At this point now I've read 2/3 of the series, so I will continue it. I'm not absolutely loving it though. And then finally I did finish Spectres in the Glass House by Jamie Jo Wright. So this is her newest book that came out in October, and wow, this one hit close to home. I can't tell why because of spoilers, but I read it on the way back from our road trip, and right before that we had been having Thanksgiving supper or lunch with my family and going through like family history books, and I learned some things in my family history that very much line up with some of the things in this book that I can't tell you because of spoilers, but if you've read the book then you'll probably know. So there's 2 timelines like she always does. So in the past timeline we're following Marianne Arnold. She was the daughter of her father was like owned a brewery, but it went under because of prohibition, and her mother was very eccentric and had this house built with all these like hallways that end nowhere, and she would like change construction plans partway through, and her mother was obsessed with butterflies and had this glass greenhouse with, you know, plants and butterflies, and people start dying and there's always butterflies by the bodies when they're found. So that's in the past timeline. And then modern timeline we've got Remy. She grew up in foster care and she is working as a research assistant to this old man who is researching what is the butterfly butcher from years prior. And of course things start happening that are similar to things that happened like almost 100 years before. And yeah, Jamie Jo Wright just does a good job with like making things eerie. This is a perfect October book, making them eerie, but the light always wins out, and I feel like she does a good job tying up the loose ends. So once again, loved it. Yeah, that seems like a lot of books for about a week. A really good reading month, I would say. So I just barely shared my last clip. I think I filmed that 2 days ago, and I finished a couple other books and DNF'd a couple other books, or at least one other book. So I thought I would pop on for another update in no particular order. Let's start with the DNF, I guess. I DNF'd 5 Feet Apart, which is too bad because this cover is gorgeous. The reason we got this book, my oldest got it from a little free library. She is very fascinated by cystic fibrosis, always has been, and this book is about 2 people that have cystic fibrosis that are in hospital. I really wanted to like this book. I was proofreading it for her because it is YA, and I was afraid it would kind of go the way of John Green's The Fault in Our Stars. That's what it's called. It's yeah, and it did. I only got to chapter 4. Like I read the first 3 chapters, so less than 50 pages. Yeah, just under 50 pages, and it totally went there. It just got too many mature themes in my opinion, which is too bad because it felt like it had promise, but there was a couple different red flags, and I was like, I'm only reading this to proof it for her, and I've already hit the red flags, so I'm not going to continue it. If you enjoyed The Fault in Our Stars, you may enjoy this one. I'll just say that. Did I DNF another book? I kind of feel like I did. No, okay, I didn't. So the rest of these I finished. Oh, the first one is Coraline. I had to bring that back to the library yesterday. I've been curious about this Neil Gaiman book. The only book of his that I've ever enjoyed is Fortunately the Milk, which is just whimsical and funny. It's great on audio because he reads it. There's lots of pictures in the book. But Coraline, I've heard, is weird and great for the season, so I wanted to read it. And it is weird. I wouldn't put it down as like spooky because it's so out there that it, in my opinion, like the closer things are to reality, the scarier they can be. So this is about a girl who ends up finding out that there's another side to their apartment, and there's another mother and another father who really want to keep her there, but things are really sketchy. And so it's her trying to get back to her real mother and father and that kind of thing, which sounds like it could be creepy, but it kind of reminded me of Roald Dahl's The Witches, but I like that book. It's so out there that it's not scary at all, in my opinion. I'm curious about the movie though. I'm willing to try the movie if I can get it for free. I don't know. I don't see why people love it, but whatever, they're free to. It was just strange. Then I read Bridge of Souls. I listened to this one. So this is the last book in the Cassidy Blake series. In this one, they go to New Orleans, and this one kind of crossed some lines for me. So it's interesting. Like, I'm okay with them pretending ghosts are real in books and stuff like that, but this one had a lot of talk of like voodoo and seances, and it does say that stuff, and tarot cards, and it does say that stuff isn't real in here, but yet it's kind of talked about and experimented with in a way that I feel like it crosses a line for me. The story itself is interesting. So Cassidy Blake died. I think I just explained this in an earlier clip, or she almost died a year ago, and now is best friends with a ghost and can see ghosts and stuff. Yeah, whatever. I'm just glad I'm done the series. I thought maybe there was pictures in here, but it just turns out that there's just dark pages in the different parts. I listened to all 3 of the books, so done with that series. Then I read The Quiche of Death by MC Beaton. So this is the first Agatha Raisin mystery, which lots of people tell me they really enjoy. I don't quite get it. I did realize that I started this book a few years ago, or at some point. Agatha Raisin, has a business, a publicity firm or something like that, and she retires and moves to this small little village in the Cotswolds. And the thing is, she's a very unlikable person. She doesn't care about taking people off. She just wants to make them do what she wants to make them do. So she enters a baking competition, enters a quiche, which she actually bought from a store, and pretended it was hers. And someone dies eating her quiche, and so she's trying to figure out who done it. And I thought maybe she'd become more likable as the book went, and I didn't find that she did. I mean, like, it wasn't a bad book. It's just, I don't know, it's not for me. I would rather hang out with Mrs. Polifax and Miss Marple any day. So I don't imagine that I will continue the series, but I'm not completely closing the door there. So yeah, 3 finishes and a DNF, and none of them that I loved. So hopefully my next check-in will have a little bit more positivity. And on to my final wrap-up of the month. Because I got sick, I was supposed to film like an update the day that I got sick. So this is more books than I would normally update, more time. I got sick, read a bunch, and then got really sick of reading. So you win some, you lose some. First, let's start with the DNFs. The first one I decided to DNF is Radiant by Ashley Bustamante. This is the second book in the Color Theory series. I was not in love with book 1. I think I physically read it though. I'm blanking. It was a while ago. So this is a fantasy series where I kind of forget the premise actually, But I started book 2 on audio, and one of the things that majorly bugged me about book 1 is there is this love interest between this girl that is in high school and this guy who I think is like about her age, like maybe a couple years older, but it constantly describes him having this cane, and he refers to her as Miss Ava. So in my mind, he comes across as this like really old guy, and he seems like such a creeper. And with the audiobook, you couldn't just read over the Miss Ava like you could when you were like reading it. You know, it was always right there, and it was too much. I didn't even get very far into the audiobook. I don't know how the like plot of the book was going. Well, that is not true. There are things that were kind of bugging me about the plot too. So I DNF'd it and decided to just quit the series. No Miss Ava for me, unfortunately. It's frustrating because it seems like such a minor thing, but it really irritated me and like really messed with my ability to visualize these characters, and I've found over the years that's very important to me. So I guess I quit that series. I have not DNF'd very many Enclave books before, so I feel a bit bad. And then the next DNF for me is unfortunate because it's another one that I was like really looking forward to because I have really enjoyed this author's other books before. It's The Enchanted Lives of Celeste Artois by Ryan Grodin. So she wrote Wolf by Wolf, that duology. Walled City I read this summer and loved. She often hits like on hard topics, but does them well. And this one is fantasy, so it is different than her other ones. Fantasy 1913 Paris, I think. Our main character lives in a graveyard with 2 others, and they are con artists, which is very interesting. I think I might have liked the book without the fantasy elements if it had just continued in that way. But then we go to, I think it's an opera, and apparently now all of a sudden our main character can see magic, and it just like opened up this world that just got really confusing to me. And I also feel like the language picked up. The swearing wasn't huge, but it picked up kind of for no reason, and I didn't really like that. So that was sad. I don't like being disappointed about books that I was really excited about. But now we can get on to books that I finished, and a bunch of them had to go back to the library already. So I'm going to keep my Goodreads open to make sure that I don't miss any of them. Okay, the next one that I had finished is Moo by Sharon Creech. And I actually listened to this on audio, so I didn't realize at first that part of the book is free verse, but like certain chapters aren't. So it's about, our main character is 12-ish, I think. Her family moves from the city to small town Maine, and her and her brother get a job working on a farm, working with a cow, trying to get the cow ready to show. And I thought it was really well done. Sharon Creech, she can be really hit or miss for me, but and I think maybe I've read this book before. I get this one and Home of the Brave mixed up for whatever reason. There's a cow on that cover too. Maybe that's why. I feel like Sharon Creech did a really good job getting some deep themes going in here. So enjoyed that. Then I read Savage Bread. This is the last book in the, what's the series called? The Royal Rose Chronicles by Victoria McCombs. So did I just read book 1 earlier this month? Or was that last month? No, it was earlier this month, wasn't it? So we can continue to follow Emmy and some other pirates. It's like the 3rd book in the series, what can you say? I feel like it ended well. I give it 4 stars, but like I think I said earlier with the 2nd book, there's just a lot of like betrayal and backstabbing, which is, I guess, understandable to be expected with pirates, but there was just so much of it that I wish people would have had better relationships. I mean, if pirates had better relationships, maybe that would have fixed some of their problems. But overall, a good story. Still, Victoria McCombs, my favorite has been the Mortal Queen series, and I am so excited I got an ARC for her newest book that is not released yet. Well, even Mortal Queen's Lethal Kings is technically not released yet either, but I like where her writing seems to be going, so looking forward to reading more from her. Then I read Remember Me. This was a recommendation over on my Patreon book club last month, and it sounded amazing, and it was. I gave it 5 stars. So this is a dual timeline story that has the Jamie Jo Wright vibes, but whereas, I don't know if you guys can hear, my 11-year-old is just coughing in the background. That kid just cannot get over this cold. He got sick a little bit before me, and his cough is just continuing. Anyway, if you're all of a sudden hearing that, that's what that is. Okay, so I always say Jamie Jo Wright, what I love about her books is things can be explained. There's no ghosts, even though when you're reading it, you're like, how can it not be a ghost? This book, Remember Me, goes a little bit more fantasy. It's not quite as explainable or as easily explainable. I just want to give that like precursor for those that are expecting one thing and disappointed if you don't get it. But it has the gothic mystery vibes that Jamie Jo Wright writes. So in the early 1900s, we're with a 17-year-old-ish girl. Her family is going to this hotel for the summer because she's engaged to this rich guy, and you know, they're just kind of like spending the summer at the hotel. Oh man, rich people, their lives, I just don't understand it. So her family was rich, but her dad lost their money for somehow, but they're keeping up appearances. So she got all the new dresses and everything to keep up appearances so that she can marry this guy that's rich, so that their family will be okay. So that is one timeline. Oh, but the guy that she's supposed to marry is a complete jerk, okay? And then in the like modern timeline, we're following a girl who is moving into this hotel with her father because her father is, you know, he's gonna work for the hotel. And she has some trauma because her mom passed away years ago, so she's got like that going on, and she starts to like hear music that isn't there, and she is spending her summer working in the basement of the hotel, cleaning out a bunch of the old, I don't know, like paraphernalia and stuff, and catches glimpses of things that happened years before. There was a murder, and she feels the need to figure out kind of what happened. I'll leave it at that. Definitely has some really good gothic writing, some eerie vibes. If you're up for that, totally recommend it. Then I went for a non-gothic, Agatha Christie, The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. This is a short story collection with 12 short stories with Harley Quinn. Well, I guess it's not gothic, but we do kind of have like a ghost character. Harley Quinn is kind of unexplainable. He kind of is a ghost. So you would think that he's like our main character, but actually the main character is this elderly man whose name I just cannot figure out how to say. Mr. Satterthwaite, maybe like that, is the main character, but he always runs into Mr. Quinn, who kind of helps him figure out whatever the problem is. And Mr. Quinn, we never quite figure out who or what he is. So like most short story collections, I ranged from like 3 to 5 stars. I liked a lot of them. Some of them were kind of meh, but another Agatha Christie done. I did a vlog over on Patreon sharing my thoughts as I read like every 3 stories or so. So there's that. Then I finally read The House of Silk by Anthony Horowitz. This is a Sherlock Holmes novel. I think this is a series where I don't know how many books there actually is now. Maybe it's just one. Why do I never look this up? Let's find out together. Horowitz Holmes. There are 2.5 books in the series. There's 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. And the ratings really go downhill after this one. Okay, well, good. I'll just stop here. So he has written Sherlock Holmes as Sherlock was in the 1800s. We've got Watson writing the story. So it's just very much just like a Sherlock Holmes novel, but written years later. And it did feel very Sherlocky. Someone comes with a problem and they try to help solve it. It was okay. No, I think I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it, but I also realized like Sherlock is meant to be short stories because he isn't super likable. There is no like humor. Like I feel like if you were gonna make this a longer thing, more books in the series, there needs to be a little bit more to it. I think he did a great job sticking to who Sherlock is, his personality. It definitely felt like it could have been written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And it had some really good twists. I was very curious to see how it ended. It is quite dark, the ending, but I think it's handled well. So there's that. Then another 5-star book, which was another Patreon recommendation, was The Forgotten Book by Mathilde Glacier? Not really sure. This, I think, was originally written in German and then translated. Charlene from Coffee with a Book? I always forget. I'll leave her linked. She recommended this over on my Patreon in our book club like probably a year ago. And I've been meaning to read it ever since. So this has those like dark academia, boarding school vibes with some fantasy. It's kind of got that like a little bit Harry Potter feel, except we're in Germany and there is a boarding school that is very well regarded. Our main character is one of the few that go to the school that is not rich. Her father is like the headmaster, so that's why she's there. And a few years before I think maybe the year before she started school, and I think she's like 16-ish. So the year, I'm trying to do the math here. I think she's probably started when she was 12. The year before she came, a student went missing. And so the school year is starting up and the twin brother to the student that went missing shows up. His family owns the castle that this school is set in, and so he kind of just takes up residence there because he's trying to figure out like what happened to his sister. And yeah, it's just got those great dark academia vibes. Like I said, I love that the main character really loves her school, so she's not trying to skip class and like she's not hating her time there. I really liked that aspect of it. And there are some things that she comes across. First of all, she comes across this old journal that she starts to write in and realizes that the things that she writes mostly come true. Sometimes not on her timeline and sometimes with a bit of a twist. And she starts to uncover some of the history of the school and the castle that it's in. Really loved it. It was like just perfect vibes that I was going for. So definitely recommend that. Then this is kind of a strange one for me to like share, but I read Cold Escape. This is, how many short stories? 5 Christian romantic suspense novels. I only read one of them because Shatona Havig was in there. So I was like, I want to read her short story. And yeah, so I did. This one of hers is kind of like adjacent to her Agency Files series. If you've read that series, you don't have to have at all. I've read, I think, 2 books in that series. Really good one. And so we follow a young woman who just started living with her great aunt for various reasons. And she gets home to find her great aunt murdered. And her great aunt had mentioned, if ever anything seems off or something happens to me, take this backpack and leave. So that's what she does. And but she sees someone in the apartment parking lot as she's leaving and thinks that they might be following her. She goes to a motel, and when she went to go get some groceries or something as she's coming back, her hotel room kind of like blew up and stuff. So she just hikes it out of there and comes across this huge building that seems empty and decides to just hide out in there, only to be hiding out and find that the owner is arriving. He has just broken his leg and his leg is in traction, so he's kind of stuck in a room, and so she just kind of makes herself at home in the rest of his house. And it's Cold Escape, so these are like winter themed books. I might pick up the rest of them during winter because this had a lot of snow, like there was a big snowstorm coming in. And I love that Shatona, she always writes a great humor, like slightly, I feel like it seems like a slightly absurd character or with slightly absurd ideas, but actually those are like completely normal ideas that we always, well at least I have, and I'm sure other people do too, that are actually kind of absurd. But then she always goes deeper than I expect. Her books are often like, okay, you think, okay, I know where this is going, like we're gonna go here, 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 but she always takes it longer and deeper than I expect, even though I know this about her. Yeah, so really enjoyed it. Can't say anything else for the other ones in the collection, but I will read those eventually. Then I read Cloaked in Beauty. This is by Karen Whitmire or Whittemire? I don't know. I came across this on NetGalley and saw that it was kind of like a Little Red Riding Hood, not retelling, but inspired story. If I would have like actually looked this book up on Goodreads, which apparently I didn't, which is good because it's part of a series called Texas Ever After, I think, or something, and I would have instantly been like, okay, that's kind of too cheesy for me, but I actually really enjoyed the story. So we follow a woman, her name is Scarlett. She has been in hiding for the last 15 years. Her and her grandmother, so her and her grandmother are in the woods. Scarlett has a pet wolf. Here's the whole like Little Red Riding Hood vibes. The reason they're in hiding is because her uncle tried to kill her when she was 5 in order to get at her inheritance. So her mother has sent Scarlett and the grandmother into hiding. And when Scarlett turns 21, she gets control of her inheritance. And her 21st birthday is looming, and her uncle is intensifying the search for her. So her mother, who also, like, her mother doesn't even know where they went. Just to keep them safe, she gets a picture every few years, and like that's it. Her mother has hired a Pinkerton detective to find them and bring Scarlett home very carefully so that when she turns 21 she can sign something right away so that the uncle can't get the money. And I really enjoyed the like little bit of Pinkerton edition there. I would say in some ways the book was a little bit cliche, but in other ways I really enjoyed it. So Scarlett and this Pinkerton kind of have to go back to Scarlett's house, but via a very back way so that they don't run into the uncle's thugs. And for the most part it was really well done. I am kind of tempted to read book 2 because it's what's it called? If the Boot Fits, because it would be a Cinderella retelling, and I really like, or retelling inspired story. I generally really like Cinderella inspired stories. The only problem with Cloaked in Beauty is I feel like, and this can often happen, Christian historical fiction books, I feel like even just general Christian fiction books, this happens more than other books. Our main character was a little too perfect. She didn't really have any flaws, and that's a little bit annoying and hard to relate to. So I gave it 4 stars, I think, because of that. But overall, enjoyed it. Then I read a short story. I think this is coming out. Oh, I think it will be out already by the time this video goes live. It's called Princesses, Spies, and Other Modern Lies. I gave it 5 stars. I do rate short stories a little bit differently because it was 25 pages. My only complaint is I would like it to be longer. So there is a ball happening and our main character is getting into the ball. They are trying to find the lost princess. They're like gonna scan for some certain kind of magic that the royal family has. And our main character is trying to get into the ball with her brother, but no boys are allowed. But she's adopted, so that kind of like, oh, they're like, oh, you might be the missing princess because you're adopted and all this. Yeah, 25 pages. I can't say much. I said my only complaint is that I wish it was longer, but I think it's going to be a series, so I'm curious to see where it goes. I really liked how spunky our main character was. Yeah, I don't remember why I thought it was going to be a series. It doesn't say it now on Goodreads, but I think it's going to be. I hope so. Oh, does it say it on the... Yes, on the cover of the book, Modern Magical Mischief #1. I would love to talk more about it, but with 25 pages, I don't think I can. And then my last book for the month was Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. This is the book that I read for the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. I had to read a nonfiction, and this is one of the books I wanted to read for my DIY literature degree because G.K. Chesterton is my literary mentor for the year. I gave this book 3 stars because I honestly did not know, I still don't know what I think. Many parts I loved. Most of the parts I didn't understand. This is it's part spiritual autobiography, part apologetics. Orthodoxy is G.K. Chesterton's account of his own journey to faith. And in some ways, it felt very stream of consciousness-esque. Like he was trying to explain how he thinks of things. And sometimes that worked for me. And sometimes I would felt like, okay, maybe I could see where you're going with that. And sometimes I'm like, I don't understand how this relates at all. There was one part, I was like, how did we even get here? Let me read. I mean, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense out of context, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense in context either. But the question is, do we want to have longer and longer noses? I fancy not. I believe that we, most of us, want to say to our noses, thus far and no farther, and here shall thy proud point be stayed. And I wrote, funny, but how did we get here? Like, okay, so, and then because of that, I didn't know, like, theologically, do I agree with all of this? I don't know because I didn't understand some of it, okay? So let's take that. But the part that I did love, I'm trying to find here. So I do understand that a lot of Christians don't like magic in fantasy. And I think that's fine. I can understand reasons for that. But the reason I do like it, I also do like some fantasy that doesn't have magic, but I feel like what he explained here is exactly how I feel. That as humans, we don't have words for things, like really. And so using the word magic doesn't always mean magic. It's just like how we can describe things. So there's a couple different parts here. When we are asked why eggs turn to birds or fruits fall in autumn, we must answer exactly as the fairy godmother would answer if Cinderella asked her why mice turned to horses or her clothes fell from her at 12 o'clock. We must answer that it is magic. The only words that ever satisfied me in describing nature are the terms used in the fairy books: charm, spell, enchantment. They express the arbitrariness of the fact and its mystery. A tree grows fruit because it is a magic tree. Water runs downhill because it is bewitched. The sun shines because it is bewitched. I deny altogether that this is fantastic or even mystical. This fairy tale language about things is simply rational, agnostic. It is the only way I can express in words my clear and definite perception that one thing is quite distinct from another. So for me, it just, those words give the language that I just don't have words for otherwise. So I did love that part. Yeah, there was other parts I highlighted too. I didn't tab it at all. I thought some of his writing was pretty hilarious. It did crack me up that right off the bat, the only possible excuse for this book is that it is an answer to a challenge. Even a bad shot is dignified when he accepts a duel. And I said, how very Victorian of him, because When I read the Pickwick Papers earlier this year, like, it was just one duel after another, and you do not back down from a duel. Like, I thought that was funny. Yeah, so 3 stars. And it's not like I feel meh about it. I feel like loved it, didn't understand it, like both extremes. So take that as you will. If you guys have read this book, I would love to hear some of your thoughts. I'd love to hear what other people thought of it. Yeah, so that is my month. It was a lot of books. I'm glad I took one video off a week because October is my favorite reading month. That gave me that extra time. I think that might have to just be a tradition of mine. So let me know if I shared any books that you guys are interested in reading now. If you guys had some favorites from the month that you think I would enjoy. I'm always up for expanding my TBR list.